What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Friday, June 27th edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. Huge 14-game slate tonight. A lot to talk about. Obviously, every team outside of two are playing. So on the one hand, I think slates like this kind of suck because, especially in like your large field lottery type tournaments, you're going to have some random dude hit 2 home runs, a double, steal a base, and if you don't have him, you don't win. So on from that standpoint, I think that 14 game slates kind of suck. But the fun part is that you can kind of play whoever you want for the most part. Like ownership just gets so spread out that you don't have to worry about it quite as much. Looking at ownership projections right now, there's one player projected above 30%. There's 3 above 20%. Most are like 12% or below. So you can play really good lineups, really highly projected lineups. So that part of it, I think, is at least fun. You can kind of just get to the spots that you want to get to. And I did have time to run some tournament lineups before the show. So I am going to go game by game still, but I will talk about how my player exposures would look if the slate were starting right now. Obviously, kind of take those with a grain of salt because they will change almost definitely, at least in some spots between now and lock, as more lineups are released, as ownership changes and all of that. But it should give some insight into how I see the slate playing out right now, how I'd be approaching it, pieces that I'm getting to that are popular, pieces that aren't, all of that stuff. So I'll touch on that as we go through each game. I am also going to try and be as brief as I can on games that I'm not really getting to, especially if the field isn't getting to them either, since there are 28 teams going and I would like to finish this show before lock. So going to dive into it, but a reminder, I am using the Run the Sims projections for my lineups. You can see those on the screen. Going to be going through those as I talk about each game as well. If you want to use these for DFS, the link is in the description below. 2 subscription options there, full package, $100 a month, fully detailed projections that you see on the screen, downloadable. You can upload them into whatever optimizer, sim product, whatever it is that you use. Like I said, fully detailed, so you can see all of the different stats to come out of our in-house sim model. You can see if maybe there's places that you disagree. It makes it easier to make little tweaks if you need to. If you don't agree with some stuff, you can see exactly what you don't agree with. You can use it as a tiebreaker between guys, if you want more home run upside, more stolen base upside, whatever it may be. That also includes the MLB Draft Caddy. That is going to overlay the DraftKings projections directly onto the lineups page. And that is available as a standalone option as well. If you don't need or want the full projections package, $10, you can get the final projections just overlaid straight onto your DraftKings screen. Good for hand building if you're playing a couple of lineups, good for late swaps, all of that kind of stuff. Link is in the description below. So going to get into it, starting with the A's taking on the Yankees tonight in New York. Will Warren is pitching for the Yankees. Mitch Spence is on the mound for the A's. Very, very difficult spot, obviously, for Spence. Don't need to say too much about him. 6,600, not getting any ownership. He's in like 1% of the lineups that I would be playing if the slate started right now. Just too many pitchers on this slate to be overly interested in him against the Yankees in Yankee Stadium. On the other hand, though, we do have Will Warren here. The park is good for hitting. That is obviously true. But Will Warren has the second highest strikeout percentage on the slate coming into tonight's game, striking out 29.4% of the hitters that he has faced this year. The only pitcher with a higher strikeout percentage is Logan Gilbert. Warren's stuff is graded out as slightly above average. His command has been average. Everything looks good for Will Warren. And then you get a favorable matchup here against the A's as well. Only about a 3.5 team total. You do have Jack Wilson at the top of the lineup. Or Jacob Wilson, rather. Jack is his father. So that's one guy that won't strike out. But other than that, you do have strikeouts in this lineup really throughout, top to bottom. Still no Shea Langoliers, which makes this lineup a lot weaker as well. No Miguel Andujar, who's somebody that doesn't strike out a lot. So as a whole, this is a team that will strike out, even though you do have Jacob Wilson in there, significantly lowering the overall strikeout percentage. That's still only, one hitter. He's only going to face him probably 3 times against right-handed pitching this season as a whole. The A's active roster ranks 11th in strikeout percentage at 21.4%. But again, that is skewed downward because Jacob Wilson is impossible to strike out. The rest of these guys will. Will Warren's getting 32% ownership. He's in 32% of my lineups at 8,300. Just looks really good. And for a 14-game slate, we have good pitching, but we don't have like all the number ones going tonight. Like I said, 29.5% strikeout percentage is the second highest on the slate. Obviously, that's very good, but the highest strikeout percentage is Logan Gilbert. You don't have all these other like true aces on the slate. So that's just going to make Will Warren stand out even more at 8,300, one of the highest projected pitchers and one of the best point per dollar projections. If you sort by fantasy projections, which is over here now, you can see we have Warren with the fourth highest raw projection behind Cease, Gilbert, and Gray, but he's at least $700 less expensive than all of those guys. You can see that the fantasy points per dollar is very good on him here as well. Fourth best point per dollar play and fourth highest projection. And you can see that the 3 point per dollar plays ahead of him are not anywhere close to his salary range. They're just straight punts at pitcher with Perez, Gibson, Long, and Freeland. So Warren just really, really stands out from both an upside standpoint and a point per dollar standpoint. That does mean he'll be popular. Maybe he ends up getting steamed even a little bit more and getting higher than 30%. I would assume in your smaller field, higher stake stuff, he's absolutely more than 30%. But at the same time, this is where having 28 pitchers on the slate does come into play, because at some point, especially in the large field tournaments where you have a ton of entries, his ownership can only get so high because people are going to be playing these other good pitchers as well. So Warren looks good. I'm right in line with the field there. Offensively, if you're going to the A's, I think the argument for them would just be that Warren is going to get like 30% ownership. But I've talked about it a lot on these shows before as well. That's a lot less appealing on bigger slates. And obviously they don't really get much bigger than this one, because the window just opens for even if the A's do well enough for Will Warren to not be a great play, a high percentage of the time that happens, the A's themselves still are not great plays because they're still competing with 27 other offenses. So the negative correlation angle is not nearly as appealing on a slate of this size. As a result, right now out of 150 lineups, I have one with Nick Kurtz, and that's it. That's all I have from the A's right now. I do want to actually double check that, but I think that's all I have from the A's right now. So yeah, that's all that I would have from the A's. So again, good park for offense, negative correlation, but just plenty of other teams to get to. And most of them aren't going to have much ownership either because there are so many games. On the Yankees side, my lineups screen is frozen, but it is a better spot for them going up against Spence. He's not a terrible pitcher, but not as good as Warren. And obviously the Yankees offense is better. Limited sample, or relatively limited sample so far this year. 184 expected ISO to righties allowed by Spence, only a 102 actual. So he has been pretty lucky as far as limiting power to righties so far. 18% strikeout percentage against righties. Sets up pretty nicely for Aaron Judge. Not that he really needs the help, but it does set up nicely for him. Lefties have a 192 expected ISO against him. You get the short porch in right field as well, something that Judge has been very good at taking advantage of when he's at home this year. Aaron Judge getting 11% ownership. He would be my highest owned Yankee right now. He's in about 7% of my lineups at 6,600. So I'm not getting tons of him, but again, on a slate of this size, my exposure shouldn't mean a ton to you, especially in a situation like this where, like, obviously Aaron Judge is a good play. He just happens to not be in a ton of my lineups. But 7% Judge for me, 11% for the field. Field's getting to 7% Jazz, 5% Stanton, 4 to 5% on Grisham and Bellinger. I'm just not really getting much of the Yankees, but I do think it's a perfectly fine spot. 4% Grisham, 2% Bellinger for me. My next highest owned guys after Judge. So at least right now, I'm not getting a ton of the Yankees, but certainly not a spot where I think there's anything wrong with them. And it's not like they're super popular or anything. Judge, the only guy here getting double-digit ownership, and obviously that is well warranted. Baltimore taking on Tampa Bay. In Baltimore, it is not 100 degrees here anymore. It's cloudy and like 70, so the ball probably will not carry as much as it has been in some recent games. Ryan Pepio facing off against Tomo Sugano. Sugano 6,500. He is getting no real ownership. He's not in any of my lineups at 6,500. It is a good strikeout spot against Tampa Bay. They rank 13th in strikeout percentage, tied for 11th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching. But they also have a 122 WRC plus. And again, you just don't have to go that far down the list to find good enough pitchers today. The Orioles did skip Sugano's last start, pushed him back a few days as well. They said it wasn't injury related. They said that they were just trying to get him a few extra days, try and kind of mimic his Japanese schedule a little bit more because they don't play as many games over there. I'm taking that at face value. I assume he's fine, but you never know what sort of impact switching up your routine, getting extra days off is going to have. Sometimes you see it go well for pitchers. They have that extra juice and it doesn't, throw them off rhythm. Other pitchers, you see, they get the extra day and they're a little bit too amped up. They lose command, they lose control, and they're not as good. So would be purely speculating if I gave an opinion on what the impact is going to have or is going to be. I would say that there is even a little bit extra volatility, though, just with the extra days off that Sugano got between starts. But not getting to him. I am getting to Pepio, though. Only 13% ownership coming into him at 8,600. He's in 27% of my lineups right now, so right around 2x the field. This does look like a spot where, at least at the moment, I am taking a bit of a stand on pitching. He's a solid pitcher, and we've seen a good strikeout percentage from him in the past. 26% strikeout percentage last year. He's at 24% so far this year. Stuff Plus grades out really well through his first 94 innings at 108. Command has been better than last year, 102 location plus. Strikeout percentage is down a couple points, but still sitting at 24%. It's not an easy matchup here against the Orioles, but no Adley Rutschman, who's on the injured list. So that does increase the strikeout percentage a bit when you replace him with Gary Sanchez. O'Neill is still out. You do have Kobe Mayo in the lineup. He's batting ninth, so not as many plate appearances, but that is a high K guy in there at the bottom as well. So it's a good lineup. Like, you have Westberg back, you have Mullins back. It's certainly one of the better iterations of Baltimore lineups that we've seen throughout the season, but not having Adley does drop that strikeout percentage, and Pepio is just a good pitcher at 12% owned. So at least right now, I am getting a bit over the field on him. And you do have a relatively low team total on the Orioles as well, coming in around 4. So it's not like they have, 4.5 total or anything like that. I think it looks pretty interesting for Pepio, especially at that low ownership. I did want to double check some of the other projections in the industry. We are a little bit higher on him, 0.2 higher than other sites that I have in front of me. But it's, again, that's not like a crazy gap. It's not like we see something necessarily entirely different than other models in the industry. We just probably like Pepio a little bit more because his stuff has still been really good. He has that really good strikeout percentage in the past. So I do like him as a borderline contrarian play here, somewhat contrarian play at 12% owned. It is also, I think, really worth noting with him, 30.8% strikeout percentage against left-handed hitters this year, only 18.6% against lefties. The Orioles have against righties rather. The Orioles have 5 left-handed hitters in their lineup, but 3 in the top 5, 4 in the top 6, and their best hitters are also left-handed. Holiday, Henderson, O'Hearn, all from the left side. Westberg, Laureano in the top 5 from the right side. So that is a little bit of a benefit here too, when you do have a right-handed pitcher, but has a good changeup that he's throwing 28% of the time this year, has that elevated strikeout percentage against lefties. That is something that, when you're going up against this left-handed heavy Orioles lineup, does play in Pepio's favor a bit. So he has that working for him as well. Offensively, about a 4.8 team total for Tampa Bay, going up against Sugano. They are pretty much getting 5% ownership across the board. I'm in that same range. Brandon Lau is the high mark for me at 4,400, getting 9% ownership. Homecoming game, if that's something you're into. I don't know if he's actually from here, but I know he went to Maryland. But that obviously not actually important. 4,400 in a park that plays up left-handed power in a decent matchup here against Sugano. Sugano's still somebody that I don't really know what to make of him because he doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. There has definitely been a decent amount of smoke and mirrors so far in his rookie season, but he does also have good command. He does have the ability to, get some swings and misses on his splitter when he needs to. So I don't think he's terrible, but I don't think he's a great pitcher or probably even a good pitcher. I think he's, more of a number 5 starter. Lefties so far this year, 199 expected ISO against him, only a 14% strikeout percentage. Righties have a 211 expected ISO, only a 167 actual ISO. So he has run a little hot there, but then also it's a function of pitching in Camden Yards probably as well. It is just more difficult to hit home runs to left field for right-handed hitters than it is for lefties to pull home runs to right field. But Lau looks good. Caminero at 4,800, Diaz at 4K, getting 5 to 6% of them. Aranda showing up 5% of the time. So Tampa looks decent here. The top of the order, I think, obviously the priorities within those Tampa Bay bats. And again, Brandon Lau looking like the best option to me. For Baltimore, no real ownership coming into them. Sub 5% across the board. I'm on the same page. 3% Westberg is the high mark for me. As I mentioned, Pepio has given up more power to righties, does have the lower strikeout percentage against righties, but this is a park that isn't as good for right-handed home runs. So it's a little bit difficult to take advantage of, in addition to the fact that the best hitters for the most part in Baltimore's lineup are also left-handed. 3% Westberg, 3% Jackson Holiday, 2% Gunnar, and then just going down the list from there. So not prioritizing Baltimore at all, and neither is the field. St. Louis taking on Cleveland in Cleveland. Good park for power, particularly for left-handed power. Sonny Gray pitching for the Cards. Luis Ortiz going for the Guardians. Ortiz getting about 3% ownership. I'm getting to about 3%. Not a good strikeout matchup. He is $7,900, so he's not exactly cheap anymore. That price tag rose pretty quickly. St. Louis ranks 27th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching. They have a 110 WRC+. It's just not somebody that I really want to be allocating that much exposure to on a slate with this many pitching options. On the other side, you have $9,400 Sonny Gray, 19% ownership, 25% of my lineups right now. Strikeout numbers are down a little bit from last year, but he's still good. 26% strikeout percentage this year, 30% last year. Command has been worse. Stuff has been a little bit worse. You're seeing probably just normal aging from Sonny Gray, but that still makes him a good pitcher, and he's $9,400. It's not like you have to pay an exorbitant price tag or anything like that. And when there are 28 offenses going, there's also never going to be a shortage of cheap value bats that you can use to fit in, fill in lineups, get to a good SP1. Potentially, there's cheap SP2s that you can go to as well. So I do still like Sonny Gray here. He's always been solid at getting left-handed hitters out as well, has always had a good curveball, hasn't been somebody, with like strong traditional splits or anything like that. And you're seeing it again so far this year. 29% strikeout percentage against lefties, 23% against righties. Expected ISO to lefties is about 22 points lower than against righties. Expected WOBA is about 30 points lower. This Cleveland lineup, you have Kwan from the left side. No Jose Ramirez tonight at all. Kyle Manzardo from the left side. You have 4 lefties in the top 6. Schneemann batting 5. Nolan Jones batting 6. So you get a left-handed heavy lineup, which Gray has reverse splits. And then also the big piece is just not having Jose Ramirez, because not only is Jose Ramirez the best hitter in the lineup, a very good hitter, but he also does not strike out. He's not one of these power hitters that also strikes out 28% of the time or anything like that. When you have Ramirez and Kwan in the lineup, it makes it really difficult to rack up strikeouts, because the top of that lineup with Kwan and Ramirez, neither of those guys strike out. Now you remove Ramirez, you just have Kwan as that really low K guy at the top that is also a good hitter. So that looks really good for Gray, and also explains why the line has moved against me on my under 5.5 Gray strikeouts that I took this morning. Was kind of surprised by that one, because normally lines don't aggressively move against me, but I'm guessing it's because Jose Ramirez was projected in when I ran my stuff this morning, and he is no longer in. So that's gone from like plus 114 to plus 130 or something last I looked. Long story short, I think Gray looks pretty good here, even with a little bit of a drop-off in stuff and production so far this season. Cards have the higher run total here, as you would expect, against Ortiz, coming in right around 5. For St. Louis, 7% ownership to Brendan Donovan is the high mark, followed by 6% to Burleson, 5% to Nootbaar, sub 5% to everybody else. And I'm right around that for the most part. 10% Brendan Donovan is my highest exposed player from the Cards. 3,800, second base outfield, just a good value spot. Ortiz isn't a terrible pitcher, but he has given up a lot of power to lefties in particular. Strikeout stuff has been there, 25% strikeout percentage, but a 205 actual ISO, 228 expected ISO, 371 expected WOBA, 2 left-handed hitters. Donovan has a 408 expected WOBA with a 193 expected ISO and 210 plate appearances against right-handed pitching this year. And the power numbers in particular are really interesting to me. He only has a 127 actual ISO, but keep in mind, he plays his home games at Busch Stadium, not a great park for hitting home runs. Now you get him in Cleveland against a pitcher that struggles to limit left-handed power. I think it sets up really well for him. It sets up well for Nootbaar at 3,900. It sets up well for Burleson at 3,700. I have 7 and 6% of them respectively. And then I'm 5% or less on Contreras, Wynn, Gorman, the rest of the lineup. But those left-handed bats that do have power at the top of the order, Donovan, Nootbaar, Burleson, I do think those guys look pretty interesting. Obviously, context of a 14-game slate. It's not like I'm jamming them in to tons of lineups or anything like that, but they do match up nicely against Ortiz. There are two left-handed pitchers in Cleveland's bullpen, or two or three, I'm not sure. There's one guy listed as in their bullpen, but also listed on IL. So I'm guessing he just came back, in which case they'd have three. But at the very least, they have two. So you do have the potential for lefty-lefty matchups later on. But St. Louis does stagger their lineup. So it makes it a little bit more difficult. Like bring a lefty in for Donovan, then they have to face Wynn. Bring a lefty in for Burleson. He also has to face Contreras. Bring a lefty in for Nootbaar. He has to face Arenado, etc. So that does lower the matchup ability of Cleveland a little bit. On the Cleveland side, against Gray, about a 4 team total here. No real interest for me, no real interest for the field. Sub 5% ownership for the field, sub 5% for me. 2% Manzardo, 2% $2,700 David Fry are my highest owned guys from Cleveland. I mentioned Sonny Gray's reverse splits this season. 23% strikeout percentage against righties compared to 29% against lefties. 181 expected ISO to righties, 159 to lefties. So not drastic splits and not bad against either side. But if for whatever reason you just really love David Fry, like, I don't know, maybe you're his relative or something, and you want an excuse to play him, that would be it, I guess. That, and he's cheap. The $2,700 price tag, I guess, would be the biggest one. But nothing really from Cleveland for me. Aaron Lilly said any weather concerns, nothing bad. Nothing that looks like a big issue. It's summer, so there's a handful of spots where there's just like random rain in the area. But for the most part, it looks okay. Cleveland also is warm with wind blowing out to center. So that's a negative for Gray, but it is factored into our projections. It's a positive for home run bats here as well. Again, it is factored into our stuff also. San Diego taking on Cincinnati. In Cincinnati, Dylan Cease pitching for the Padres. For the Reds, where the hell are they? For the Reds, Nick Martinez, $7,300 for Martinez. Tough strikeout matchup. Not interested in getting to him. Neither is the field. Dylan Cease, on the other hand, right now is my highest owned pitcher. He's the second highest owned pitcher for the field. 28% projected ownership coming into Cease at just $9,000. I'm getting to about 43%. He's been not very good in terms of preventing runs this season, at least as of last I checked. It seems like a lot of times he's giving up a lot of runs, but everything else has looked good for him. So I expect, especially in more favorable matchups, that you will see him just kind of get back to normal. The stuff has still been good. 108.5 stuff plus grade through 87 innings pitched, 29% strikeout percentage. Fastball velo still at 97 miles an hour. Command's been a little bit worse than last year, but still around league average. So overall, like, still looks good in pretty much every metric. You're getting a matchup here against the Reds in Cincinnati. So tough park to pitch in, without a doubt. About a 4.5 team total for Cincy, but they do also rank 9th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this year. So there is a lot of strikeout upside here for Cease. And then, two other things that come into play. One, like I said before, there's not that tier of like elite pitchers on this slate that offer a really high opportunity cost for Cease. And then he's only $9K. So normally a pitcher with his strikeout upside would be a little bit more expensive than that. He is a little bit cheaper as a result of probably the fact that he's really liked giving up runs this year. So far this season has a 4.4 ERA. Like, obviously that's higher than you expect for him, but does have a solid strikeout matchup here. The park does suck. So not safe, but I think one of the better pitching options on the slate. And right now, he is my highest owned pitcher right now. Jake asked how Cease is at stolen base prevention. I actually have no idea off the top of my head. If I look, we can kind of just quickly look, and this won't give you a great answer because you don't have anything to compare it to other than like the slate. We have a high stolen base projection on De La Cruz. McLean, 0.16, 0.11 on Friedel. None of these stolen base numbers look crazy high. I can pull up what he's done so far this year also. But yeah, none of these numbers are like crazy high relative to what they normally do. Like, obviously 0.3 stolen bases is a very high stolen base projection, but De La Cruz always has a high stolen base projection. So far this season, 8 stolen bases allowed in 87 and a third innings pitched. That grades out as basically average. In the past, all except one season, going back to the White Sox in 2021, Cease has been average or better at preventing stolen bases. So looks like a pretty neutral spot, and that's what I expected to see just based on our Cincinnati stolen base projections. For the bats here, starting on the San Diego side against Martinez, getting to a ton of San Diego. This is a spot where I am taking a stand, at least right now. And again, I said it at the beginning of the show, but the caveat does apply that I'm going to rerun everything before the slate. So not a lock that I end up here on San Diego, but that's certainly how it's looking for me right now. Basically 5 to 10% ownership on most of this team. Fernando Tatis getting 11% at 5,500. Manny Machado getting 11% at 5,400. Jackson Merrill getting 9% at only 4,400. Bogarts getting 7% at 3,300. 6% to Arise, 5 apiece to Sheets and Cronenworth. So they're not very popular. They're in Cincinnati. They have a team total just north of 5. They're going up against a pitcher in Martinez, who's just kind of a middle of the road guy. Righties this year, 162 expected ISO. Lefties, 196. Righties only striking out 15% of the time. So there is upside here, absolutely, for San Diego. You do have some stolen base upside as well. You can see the 0.3 home run projection on Tatis, 0.27 on Merrill, 0.27 on Machado, 0.23 on Merrill. Some stolen base upside here, but particularly for Tatis and Bogarts. So San Diego just looks like a really nice combination, I think, of relatively low ownership, value, and upside. Like, you have pretty expensive salaries on Tatis and Machado. Not that those are the end of the world. They're still, right around two DraftKings points per dollar. But then beyond them, like, Jackson Merrill's underpriced. Xander Bogaerts is underpriced. Arise is underpriced. Like, you don't have a ton of power here, but he's only 3,800. Sheets has power. He's only 3,600. Cronenworth has always had power. He's 3,400. Like, there's a lot of upside in this team. And for the most part, they're really good point per dollar plays as well. So even though Martinez isn't a total gas can or anything, just the combination of power upside and park for San Diego at modest ownership, I think makes them look really good. You're going to have, solid stacks around them as well. I'll flip over to the SaberSim page for a second, just to kind of look quickly at what some of these Padres lineups look like. And maybe. There we go. Trying to look at just what some of these 5-man stacks look like to sort of reinforce the point of like how good the rest of your team from an upside standpoint can look if you have these cheap Padres. Unfortunately, this is going extremely slowly. But 14 5-man Padres stacks right now, my highest owned 5-man, as you can see. If you look at some of these 5-man lineups, if it loads ever, maybe not. All right, so scratch that. But the point that I was going to make is just that not only do you get upside from the Padres themselves, but a lot of your 5-man lineups, you're going to be able to get to whatever you want, Cease, Gray, Gilbert, Warren, whatever pitchers you want at the top. You're going to get good secondary stacks, good one-offs, etc. So I don't know why that isn't working, and I'm going to give up on that because we have so many games. But that's the point that I was going to make, and I was going to just show some of those lineups. So getting back here to the projections page. Now my SaberSim is still frozen, so that's not helpful. On the Cincinnati side, you do have a decent total here against Cease, which is interesting. I am getting to them a little bit north of the field, but still not tons. My highest owned hitter here is McLean. He is batting second, so you got a lineup bump for McLean. He's only 3,600. He started this year off slowly, but you have to keep in mind that he did miss essentially all of last season. So it is reasonable to expect that he's going to, kind of take a little bit of time getting back into the swing of things. 160 expected ISO isn't great, but it's not horrible. He gives you stolen base upside. So with that lineup bump, you get the extra projected plate appearances, 4% ownership, 7% of my lineups. De La Cruz getting 6% ownership. He's in 6% of my lineups. And then there's nobody above 3% projected for the field. I'm getting to 6% Hayes, 4% Steer, Encarnacion, Strand. So again, nothing crazy for me from Cincinnati, not getting huge amounts of any of these guys, but I do have a little bit. McLean in particular, I think looks like a pretty interesting value with his stolen base upside, in addition to some power at 3,600, negatively correlating with Cease as well. Minnesota taking on Detroit. In Detroit, Gibson Long is going for the Tigers. David Festa going for the Twins. No real interest in either of these pitchers. They're both getting like sub 3% ownership. I have 6% of Gibson Long as a value arm. I don't have any Festa. Gibson Long, 6K. Nothing, super exciting about any of these guys. It's just a matter of, if you need a cheap pitcher, Gibson Long is a perfectly solid point per dollar projection. Not a great raw points projection, not a super high ceiling or anything like that. So neither of these pitchers look like priorities to me. Offensively for Minnesota, you're getting 5% ownership coming into Buxton. That's the high mark. I think somebody just mentioned them in chat somewhere. Yeah, Minnesota grades well for stacking. Yeah, they look fine. I'm not getting a ton, but I am a little bit north of the field. 5% ownership to Buxton, 5% to Wallner, 4% to Castro, sub 4% to everybody else. I'm getting to 9% Wallner as the high mark at 3K. Just a really good price tag for him. Batting fifth. Does come generally with some pinch hit risk. We have him right now pretty low, so that's interesting as well. If I look at the Detroit bullpen, they have two lefties, but one of them, Tyler Holton, is generally used as a setup guy. So he's probably not coming in unless it's a competitive game near the end, in which case Minnesota probably didn't score a ton of runs anyway. You also have Brooks Lee batting behind Wallner and Correa batting in front of him. So it becomes difficult to match up with him anyway. You have the same thing with Trevor Larnach batting second. If you bring in a lefty to face him, they have to face Castro and Correa, and you're not bringing a lefty in before him because you have Byron Buxton. So that does sort of protect those left-handed bats a little bit, and that does lower their pinch hit risk as well. Cody Clemens not getting any ownership, 2,800 batting seventh. I have about 7% of him, 7% Correa, 7% Castro, 6 apiece on Buxton and Lee. So I am around 2x the field on Minnesota. That's not a huge percentage of my lineups, but it is around 2x the field on Minnesota. On the Detroit side, similar total here. And keep in mind, not a great home run park here in Detroit either. I'm not getting to the Tigers, basically, period. $5,200 Riley Green and $3,700 Dylan Dingler are in 1% a piece of my lineups. 3% ownership to Green, 3% to Keith. Field's not getting to them. I'm not getting to them. Just not super expensive, but Green at 5,200, relatively expensive. There's plenty of good cheap outfield options and obviously plenty of pay-up options as well. Torkelson at 4,700 doesn't look like a great value. Carpenter at 4,300. Like, there is power upside here. I think it's just a combination of the park and mostly the park, probably just not being a great spot to hit home runs. But the Tigers are good. If you want to just get unknown Tigers, go for it. They obviously have a ceiling, but there's a lot of other spots that I'm going to get to before them, it looks like. Cam said, Adam, do you have a favorite 5 of Milwaukee? Usually a tough team to pick 5 from. Usually includes Contreras, but he's been bad versus lefties this year. I'll talk on them more when I get to that one. I'll just go through what I have right now. But so yeah, I don't know if I have a favorite 5 or if I'm getting to them or not, but I will touch on that when I get there. Toronto taking on Boston in Fenway. Good park for offense. One team doesn't have an offense anymore, but that's kind of beside the point, at least to some extent. About a 4.5 total for both teams. No ownership really coming into pitching. Jose Barrios getting 3%. Brian Bayo getting 3%. I don't have either one. You can see that neither of them project all that well in terms of raw points or point per dollar projection. The Blue Jays are really difficult to strike out. The Red Sox are easier to strike out, but Barrios is relatively expensive. He's $200 more than Will Warren. He's $100 less than Ryan Pepio. So tough for me to really want to get to either of those guys outside of like maybe a lineup here or there, but I don't even have that right now. On the Toronto side against Bayo, I'm not getting to them either. Neither is the field. Sub 3% ownership to everybody. Addison Barger is the high mark at exactly 3% projected ownership. So far this season, Bayo has allowed a 171 expected ISO to lefties, 150 to righties. Not a gas can, not a great DFS pitcher, just kind of there. When he's on, in the past, in previous seasons, we've seen him able to get ground balls. We've seen him able to get some strikeouts. The strikeouts haven't really been there this year, but not getting so much of the Toronto side. They're in Fenway. Like, that's the case that you would make for them. But again, plenty of good spots to get to. Boston, I am getting a bit more. They're not very popular. 6% ownership coming into Jarren Duran, 4% or less to everybody else. I have 12% Duran right now. I don't know why I said that weird the first time. I think it's because I'm going to blame Jake. He asked the question about the Red Sox and Pelicans front office. And even though he doesn't play for the Pelicans, I think it got Jalen Duren in my mind. Jaron Duran, 6% ownership, 12% of my lineups. Abraham Toro, 4% ownership, 7% of my lineups. I have 6% of Hamilton, 5% of Story, and then works down from there. So far this season, Barrios allowing a 262 expected ISO to righties, only 147 to lefties. Strikeout percentage against lefties is about 7 points higher as well. So that's not really what you would like to see for Duran, for example, but you do get that stolen base upside with him as well. So you have some power upside. You can see kind of a middle of the road home run projection here, but you have stolen base upside as well. So at 4,500, I do like the ceiling that he offers, even though Barrios has been better against lefties overall this season. And then I think it's just the fact that Boston is pretty inexpensive. They're a pretty appealing value stack. $3,100 price tag on Toro, $2,800 for Hamilton with MPE, $3,600 for Story batting cleanup. Hasn't been good, but still batting cleanup in Fenway on a team with a 4.5 total. Roman Anthony's $3,600. So I think it's just kind of, even though the Red Sox offense isn't good, missing Devers is just such a huge piece of that offense. You do still have some raw upside. Duran in particular, Story maybe remembers occasionally how to hit. Roman Anthony's talented, but it's just like if the Red Sox do well in Fenway, which is obviously one of the best places to hit, you just have a loaded rest of your lineup most likely. So I am a little bit above the field on the Red Sox here. Philadelphia against Atlanta. Jake has to run now after fucking up my show and making me sound like an idiot. Appreciate that. Philadelphia taking on Atlanta in Atlanta. For the Braves, it's Bryce Elder. For the Phillies, it's Mick Abel. 7,700 for Abel, 7,100 for Elder. No real interest in either of those guys. Tough matchup for both. I don't have either one at the moment. The field is projected to have like 3% Elder, 2% Abel. I did bet Elder over 4.5 earlier. I haven't looked to see how that line moved or not. But from a DFS standpoint, not interested in either arm. Offensively, I am not getting too much of Philadelphia. Trey Turner's getting the most ownership at 4%. Alec Boehm, Kyle Schwarber, Real Muto all getting 4% as well. The only one or two that I am above the field on, I have 6% Schwarber. That's my high mark. I have 5% Real Muto. So it's just another one of those teams that if you want to play them, great. It's a good offense. They have like a 4.5 total. They obviously have plenty of upside, but there's just other spots right now that I'm prioritizing more. If we look at Bryce Elder so far this season, 168 expected ISO to righties, 229 to lefties. So he has had that issue with left-handed power. Kyle Schwarber, the guy most likely to take advantage of that. Not having Bryce Harper does just make this a tougher team to get to for a couple of reasons. One, you're obviously just missing one of their best hitters, but in this case, it's also one of their best left-handed hitters. And you now have a pretty right-handed heavy lineup for Philadelphia. It's 5 righties and 4 lefties, but Kepler batting 5, Stott 7, Marsh 9, 7 and 9, not the most appealing spots in the order, whereas you would have Harper hitting 3rd or 4th if he were in. So that makes it a little bit more difficult to get to. But again, certainly one of those teams where if you want to play them, great, but they just aren't in my lineups right now for the most part. Atlanta on the other side, pretty similar, I think. Higher run total here, but also relatively expensive, at least Olsen and Acuna. 7% ownership coming into Olsen, 11% to Acuna, 7% to Riley. I am getting to about 6% apiece of Olsen and Acuna, 5% of Riley. So a little below the field, but nothing too crazy on those three. And then I'm not really getting to Atlanta aside from that. So most likely using them as one-offs, as like two-mans right now. Again, though, clearly a high ceiling if this is a team that you want to go to. If you can make it work salary-wise. They have a lot of good hitters. They're not all super expensive. Albies has struggled a bit this year, so he's only 3,800. Baldwin's hitting 5th at catcher. He's only 4,100. So far, limited sample this season, but Mick Abel has given up plenty of expected power. 193 expected ISO to righties, 333 to lefties. Kind of a mixed bag in terms of minor league production, which I think makes him even more volatile when you try and project him at the major league level and you try and talk about the Braves against him, because he is somebody that was a top 100 prospect a couple years ago and then sort of fell off a little bit and wasn't on top 100 prospects lists coming into this season, and then now he's up in the majors. He had some success at AAA this year, so kind of remains to be seen what the real version of him is. either way, Atlanta has a high ceiling because they're Atlanta. But there's just kind of some extra volatility there. Darian said, are you strictly sticking to 5 and 4-man lineups, or are you mixing in some 3-3s? Right now, with the lineups I built, everything is 5 or 4, except for a combined, like, 5 to 6% of my lineups are 3-2-2, 3-3, 3-3-2, 3-2. So like 95% of my lineups right now are 4 or 5-man stacks. San Francisco taking on the White Sox in Chicago. And just to kind of back up to that too, I don't manually ever change that. I have enough confidence in my process doing what I want it to and what it should, and it being simulation based, that I take whatever I get. But generally, I do end up in that sort of same range that I'm in right now. Like, there are some slates where I end up a little bit more of 3-3, but for me personally, I don't like ever uncheck 3s or anything like that. If you're using an optimizer, something that is just using median projections, not factoring in correlations, then you're going to want to pay closer attention, make sure you're actually getting the stack types that you want. For me, basically, the stack types that I want are whatever comes out of my lineup building process. Aaron said unstacked seems okay. I mean, yeah, like the optimal lineup is usually going to be unstacked or like a 3-2 or something like that. The problem obviously is that it's so hard to hit. It's just hitting like an 8-leg uncorrelated parlay is very, very difficult, and you don't need to do it to win typically. Also, you have the bigger, like the lotto on DraftKings tonight is bigger. It's the $8, like 29,000 entries, but it's not like you have the $5 50,000 entry or something like that. Like, yeah, I don't have anything unstacked, but I mean, unstacked is always okay because the optimal lineup usually is going to be very close to unstacked, if not unstacked. It's just that you're giving up a lot of floor and likelihood of being right. San Francisco taking on the White Sox in Chicago. Aaron Savali going for the White Sox. He's not getting any ownership. I don't have him. He's in one lineup at the moment. On the other side, it is Landon Rupp getting 3% ownership at 7,600. I'm not getting to him either. I kind of would have expected that I'd be getting some Landon Rupp at 7,600 against the White Sox, but doesn't project all that well for us. As you can see on the screen, Field's not projected to get to him at 3% owned. Our projection's in line with other sites I'm looking at. So just, I guess, kind of how it grades out, that for once, we're just not blindly jamming a pitcher against the White Sox, I guess, or at least I'm not. He is fine. Like, he has a 21% strikeout percentage this year, 98 stuff plus grade in 76 innings pitched. Command this year is worse than last year, but it's still been excellent with a 107 location plus. So I think it's probably more a function of, one, just the size of the slate and the vast number of pitchers, but he's also a really weird price point. Anthony, I think, just kind of got to it here, saying he's more expensive than Soriano. He's not expensive in raw terms, right? At 7,600, but he's $700 less than Will Warren, who projects like 6 points higher or something. He's $1,000 less than Ryan Pepio, who projected like 4 points higher. But then also on the other side, like, you need to save money, he's more expensive than Yuri Perez. He's more expensive, I guess, than Soriano, because Anthony just said it. I didn't actually know off the top of my head. Yeah, he's $200 more expensive than Soriano. Like, you just get him at this weird point where, I've talked about it on shows before. Generally, your highest owned guys are going to be either the ones with the highest projection or the best point per dollar plays. And if you look here, you sort by projection. Landon Rupp is down here. Now, obviously, like, any of these guys are arguable. Like, they're kind of the same. You can say, well, actually, I think Landon Rupp belongs here. Fine, it doesn't matter. He's in this range down here, and if you sort by point per dollar projection, he's even further down. He's down here. So that's kind of the issue, I think, is you get the weird pricing where from a point per dollar standpoint, if you really need a cheap pitcher, just get one of the actual cheap pitchers. And then if you can afford to go into the mid-range, you have Warren, you have Pepio, you have Soriano. So I think that's kind of the problem here with Landon Rupp, which does mean that you can be pretty confident, I think, that he's not going to be very popular. Like, maybe he gets steamed a little bit just because people want to click a pitcher against the White Sox and he gets to like 6%. But you can be pretty confident that like Sims aren't going to just jam him in the lineups because he's not checking either of those two main boxes. And he's not a great leverage play because nobody's going to play the White Sox. So he's not checking any of those boxes that you always have to be aware of for like that unexpected ownership steam that comes from everybody using Sims. He's not the highest projected. He's not the best point per dollar, not close to it. And nobody's playing the team that he's pitching against. So he's probably not going to just get bumped up. If you want to just play the 4 or 5% owned guy against the White Sox, you can be pretty comfortable that he's going to be 4 or 5% owned, I think. But, you know, again, all things considered, it's just very tough to get to him. And I'm not getting to him right now, even at that ownership. Looking at the offenses here, starting on the San Francisco side, Rafael Devers getting 13% ownership. That's one of the higher owned bats on the slate, and I am actually north of that. He is $5,000. He's outside of San Francisco, so you get that park upgrade for the Giants bats. Kind of a weird one for Devers, where it's a downgrade from where he's played his home games for 95% of the season, but it's an upgrade from where he currently plays them. So he looks really good here at only 5K. He, like I said, getting 13% ownership. I have 21%, 5% ownership coming into Yastrzemski, 7 to Adames, 8 to Ramos, 6 to Bailey, 3 to Koss, 3 to Lee, 5 to Flores. I'm north of the field on pretty much all of that. Also didn't have the Giants lineup when I ran everything, but we do have it now. So let me just go ahead and double check that. I was using their projected lineup when I built. Ramos, Devers, Flores, Yastrzemski, Adames, Lee, Koss, Bailey, Wisely. So there's no Flores. There is Flores. There's no. Who the hell is missing? Oh, somebody that I didn't have. Yeah, okay. So Wisely's in batting ninth. Doesn't matter. Devers looks really good here. I am about 2x the field on Yastrzemski. I have 9% Adames, 9% Ramos, 8% Bailey. So a little above the field on those guys. Just like the spot for San Francisco. Savali, 184 expected ISO to lefties so far this year, 261 to righties. Go back to last year, those numbers are better. 154 to lefties, 173 to righties. But you're also, again, just getting that park upgrade for Giants bats. So it's, to some extent, they're priced, to be playing in San Francisco. So, 4,300 for Yaz, 4K for Adames, 4,500 for Ramos. These guys have plenty of upside. I do like the Giants here, specifically Rafael Devers. On the White Sox side, this is a team that I usually get a lot of, and fortunately today I am not getting a ton. I do have a pretty good amount of Andrew Benintendi. I play him almost every slate, it seems like. He's 3K. He's batting third. He's getting 4% ownership. I have 11%. Benintendi, I think there's like that narrative around him, and for good reason, of him just kind of being like this annoying slap hitter that doesn't do a lot from a DFS standpoint. But that really hasn't been the case this year. 178 plate appearances against right-handed pitching, 372 expected WOBA, 272 expected ISO, 194 actual ISO. So it's not even like, there's just some glitch in the expected ISO and there's a 200-point gap. Like, he's hitting for real power and seemingly has been unlucky as well. So from a value/upside standpoint, I just think Benintendi looks good. Kyle Teal getting 3% ownership, batting 5th at 2,800. He's in 5% of my lineups. I have 4% Medraw, 4% Talkman, 3% Vargas, who also has power and speed upside. So I am getting a little bit of, basically 1 through 6 for the White Sox. I don't have anybody outside of 1 through 6, but it's not crazy amounts. Benintendi is my biggest stand there in 11% of my lineups. And I'm perfectly happy with that because I do actually think he's a pretty good hitter, especially for the price. So far this season, Rupp allowing a 184 expected ISO to lefties, 261 to righties. He has given up power. Not that there's a lot of it in this White Sox lineup, but the guys that do have it, can certainly take advantage. Seattle taking on Texas. In Texas, Logan Gilbert pitching for Seattle. For the Rangers, it is Nathan Eovaldi. $9,800 price tag for Eovaldi, $10,000 for Gilbert. These are two of the highest projected pitchers on the slate. I thought. The hell? I looked at the wrong. Okay, Gilbert's one of the highest projected pitchers on the slate. My eyes jumped on the fantasy projection. But Gilbert, one of the highest projected pitchers on the slate at 18.5. $10,000 price tag. Not cheap, but it is workable. 29% projected ownership to Gilbert, 27% to me. 2% ownership coming into Eovaldi. I don't have him. This Rangers lineup it has talent, but it just hasn't really been that good for most of this season. It is a big park downgrade, though, for Logan Gilbert. That is one thing to keep in mind. You're going into a very home run friendly park. He pitches his home games in the best park to pitch in baseball. Overall this season, Texas is only 21st in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching, but they are also 24th in WRC plus. And Gilbert's just a good pitcher. Missed the beginning of the season with an injury, but he's thrown 40 innings total. 38% strikeout percentage. Like, that will come down at least somewhat, but even last year, 27% strikeout percentage. He has excellent command, 116 location plus, pitching plus grade, which works to combine stuff and command, is 116, which is well above average and by far the best on this slate. So he looks very good. He is just relatively expensive, even when you compare him to, Gray and Cease. But projects well, good enough matchup, even though the park is scary. Right around the field on him, getting about 27%. Park upgrade here for Seattle, but they're not getting any ownership. I'm not getting to them. $6,400 Cal Raleigh. I get it. It is warranted. If you can find a way to get him into your lineup, great, especially because, at catcher, he's clearly the highest ceiling guy because most of them can't hit at all. But then the counter to that is normally at catcher, you kind of can just get cheaper bats than you can at other positions. The opportunity cost in general is less. So, like, if you go to Cal Raleigh as a $6,400 catcher, that's great. But now you need to find like that really cheap second baseman or third baseman or whatever to offset that. Whereas if you go to like Aaron Judge at basically the same price in the outfield, you can play $2,800 Kyle Teal or something, Patrick Bailey, something like that at catcher, and you're not giving up quite as much. So that makes it tough. But again, it is a park upgrade. Cal Raleigh is excellent. He gives you stolen base upside as well, which is something that I think gets completely slept on when people talk about him because the home run numbers have been so great and because he's a catcher. But this is somebody that can steal some bases as well. Not a huge stolen base projection, but it's not nothing. So there is that. Rodriguez coming in at 5,400. I'm not getting to anything here outside of like one lineup with Raleigh, one lineup with Rodriguez. And again, the field's not getting there either. If you look at Evaldi so far this season, 208 expected ISO to lefties, 128 to righties. You would prefer left-handed power bats. Again, Cal Raleigh. But Evaldi's strikeout numbers are there as well. 28% K percentage against lefties, 26% against righties. For the Rangers on the other side against Gilbert, I'm not really getting anything. Field's not really getting anything. Again, you can make that negative correlation argument, park downgrade argument for Gilbert, but it only goes so far when you have 28 teams that you're competing against. Cubs taking on the Astros in Houston. Cade Horton for the Cubs. I mix up him and Tyler Holton in my head every single time one of them pitches. Cade Horton going for the Cubs. Brendan Walter pitching for Houston. I'm not getting to either one. Field's getting like 2% or less of both of them. The bats, both these teams have an implied run total around 4.5. Not getting to much of the Cubs. Neither is the field. Like 2 to 3% projected ownership coming into Suzuki, Tucker, Swanson, Kelly, and then less than that to everybody else. I have 1% or less of everybody on the Cubs. Throw them in that bucket with other teams we've talked about where they're obviously good, like the Tigers. If you want to make Cub stacks, go for it. They steal a lot of bases. They're in a park that plays up right-handed power in particular. The ceiling is obviously massive. They just happen to be a low-owned team that I'm not getting much of. They are expensive. $6,300 for Tucker, $5,300 for Suzuki. Obviously, both those guys have earned that. $6K for Crow Armstrong, also warranted. But it just becomes, difficult to stack those guys together, especially when you keep in mind that you still have to beat all these other teams. And at those prices, the Cubs can score the most runs on the slate and still not be optimal because there's 27 other teams, most of them a lot cheaper, that can come close. And then you just have better pitching, better one-offs, whatever, around those stacks. So that's kind of the problem with the Cubs. Einsteinium said Tucker revenge season. First trip, I assume, back to Houston for him. On the Astros side against Horton, not getting much of them either. They are more reasonably priced than the Cubs are. Most of the top point per dollar plays here are from Houston, but still not getting to much. If we take a quick look at the pitching in this game, Walter so far this season, very limited sample. If you go back to 2023, you get a little bit larger sample, but still small. 162 expected ISO to righties, 124 to lefties. For Cade Horton, so far. 133 expected ISO to lefties, 222 to righties. That is interesting. It's only 290 pitches thrown. It probably will come down, but it is kind of interesting that you have this guy that has struggled with right-handed power so far, and now he faces them with a little league wall in left field for them to pull home runs at. But no ownership coming into Houston. I'm not getting there either. It does. I'm a little surprised I don't have more Houston just because they are relatively cheap. Like 4,300 for Altuve with MPE, 4,900 for Pena, who's been great lately, 3,600 for Diaz, 4,300 in this park for Paredes, 3,600 Walker. That's a lot of cheap upside. Maybe if I were getting like less of the Padres, I'd have more Houston. I think they kind of fill that same role where there is upside. They are really cheap. The Padres do project a bit better. They are also a little bit more popular, but maybe I'd have a little bit more Houston if I wasn't using San Diego so much. Dodgers facing Kansas City in Kauffman. Home run park downgrade, big time for the Dodgers. On the mound for Kansas City, it's Noah Cameron. For the Dodgers, it's Dustin May. Field isn't playing either one. Neither am I. Tough strikeout matchup for both of them. Bad park for getting strikeouts as well. Against right-handed pitching so far this season, Kansas City ranks 29th in strikeout percentage. Against left-handed pitching since last season, the Dodgers rank somewhere, maybe 25th in strikeout percentage against left-handed pitching. So tough strikeout matchup, tough strikeout park. No real interest in either one of these guys. I just don't. It goes back to, and this applies to the, I see people wanting Walter and Horton as well. It's not that either of them are necessarily bad plays. Like if this were a 6-game slate, you'd probably have interest at the very least in Horton against the Astros. But it's just that even popular plays on this slate, especially bats, are going to be 5 to 10% owned. You don't have to go that far down the board in terms of projection to be different. So giving up a lot of points in projection, like you can obviously give up more projected points in baseball than you can in other sports. But in general, on a slate of this size, I'm going to want to play lineups that are closer to the highest projected lineups just because I can do that at a similar ownership rate as the lineups further down the list. When you play like a 6-game slate or an 8-game slate or something like that, it becomes more difficult because everything that projects well is going to have ownership because you don't have that many options. On a slate of this size, though, once you get away from like those highest owned guys, there's just not a lot of ownership coming into anybody individually. For the bats here, I am getting to the Dodgers despite the park downgrade. Still a good park for scoring runs, just not for hitting home runs. Shohei Ohtani, SaberSim screen froze on me, but Shohei Ohtani getting 12% ownership. He's in 13% of my lineups. 8% ownership coming into Smith, 8% to Betts, 6% to Hernandez, 4 to 5% to pretty much everybody else on the Dodgers. I'm pretty similar. 13% Ohtani is my highest owned guy. 9% $4,900 Will Smith. 7% Mookie, $4,700 at shortstop. 6% Tommy Edman, $3,700 second base outfield, and then less than that everywhere else. So I'm pretty much in line with the field. You can see that we by far have the highest home run projection on Ohtani, followed by Hernandez, Betts, and Smith. So far this season, Cameron has been unbelievably good at preventing runs. Doesn't project to be that guy going forward long term. Only an 18% strikeout percentage against either side of the plate. 157 expected ISO to righties, 159 to lefties. So like he's been fine even in terms of expected numbers, but obviously the Dodgers are very, very good. On the Kansas City side against Dustin May, about a 4.5 team total for Kansas City. So far this season, May striking out 16% of righties with a 179 expected ISO. Higher strikeout percentage by about 8 points to lefties. But a little bit more power allowed as well. 182 expected ISO, 200 actual ISO. Bobby Witt Jr. getting 11% ownership. I have 21% at 5,300. I just play a lot of Bobby Witt basically whenever he's this price tag. The stolen base upside combined with power upside that he gives you is very, very high. Really good. We have it projected as a really good stolen base spot for him. Good home runs, good home run hitter in general as well. So I like him a lot at 5,300. I'm around 2x the field. He is one of the more popular bats on the slate anyway at 11%. 5% ownership to Perez. I'm 2x the field there at 10%. 4% ownership to India. I have 13. 4% to Garcia. I have 11. And then I have like 3 or 4% Pasquantino, Caglione, John Rave, whoever that is, at 2,200. But Bobby Witt, Perez, India, Garcia, 1, 2, 3, and 5 in this lineup. Showing up a lot for me right now. I think May is a solid pitcher. Like I said, he gives up some power, but not a ton to either side of the plate. When he's on, he gets a lot of ground balls. But I do like the pricing here on Kansas City. They're just still really cheap for the upside that they offer. Bobby Witt is probably $500 to $1,000 less expensive than he really should be. Perez has been hitting the ball hard all season long. He's only $3,300 and he is catcher eligible. India doesn't really steal bases anymore, which sucks, but he's only $3,200 leading off. Garcia does steal bases. He's $4,600. So I'm fine getting here, even though I don't love the park. I don't love the matchup. It's just another spot where I know the rest of my lineup is going to be really, really good and have a really high ceiling around Kansas City. Colorado facing Milwaukee. I know I had that question earlier about the Brewers, so I'll get to that one in a minute. For the Brewers, it's Jose Quintana. He is $8,000, getting 8% ownership. I'm not getting to him right now, but clearly, if you want to play some Quintana against the Rockies outside of Coors Field, go for it. They suck. Kind of like the same thing as Landon Rupp, except Quintana is getting a little bit more ownership. Kyle Freeland, $5,500, sub 2% ownership. I have 4% just because he's really cheap, and those lineups probably have like Judge plus Ohtani or some shit like that. But overall, I'm not really getting to the pitching in this one. On the Rockies side, I do have 11% Hunter Goodman. He's only projected for 3% ownership. I mean, he's a good hitter. He's a catcher. Is he also not in the lineup? Okay, so didn't have the Rockies lineup when I ran everything. So we can go ahead and ignore that because he's not in. So no Hunter Goodman. That is going to actually make Quintana look better. And then obviously it makes the Rockies look worse. I had 6% Tyler Estrada. He is batting third at 3,100. So that's a solid value. Brenton Doyle's batting seventh at 3,300. I had 3% of him, 5% Jordan Beck batting second. So I have small amounts of like Beck, Estrada, Doyle. Goodman was my highest owned guy, but he's not in the lineup. Again, that does make Quintana look better. You're taking one of the only good hitters in the lineup out. He also has the platoon advantage against Ryan McMahon, who's one of the only other good hitters in the Rockies lineup. Lefties so far this season actually have a 199 expected ISO in a limited sample against Quintana, but they've also struck out 21% of the time. Righties have only struck out about 14%. So maybe I have a little bit more Quintana now that dog shit lineup came out with no Hunter Goodman, but probably not going to have a ton of Quintana either way, and not going to have much of the Rockies either. On the Milwaukee side, Contreras getting the most ownership at 8%, 4,200 at catcher. Looks like their lineup just came out. Power said Frelick, Chourio, Yelich, Contreras, Collins, Hoskins, Turang, Durbin, and Ortiz. Looks like what we had projected, I think. We had Daz Cameron in, so that is Collins in place of Cameron. Other than that, it's what we had projected. 8% ownership coming into Contreras, 7 to Chourio, 5% to Yelich, 4 to Durbin, 4 to Hoskins, 4 to Ortiz. For me, the three I'm getting to the most are Chourio, Hoskins, and Contreras. So the question I think was about the 5 that I like the most: Chourio, Hoskins, Contreras, and then really whatever fits. I think mixing in some value like Ortiz and Durbin probably, so that I can, then get really good one-offs elsewhere in my lineup. But Chourio, 12% of my lineups, 9% for Hoskins, 7% for Contreras. You mentioned Contreras not hitting lefties well so far this season. 0 power in 86 plate appearances so far, sub 100 expected ISO for him. If we go back to last year, 135 expected ISO in 252 plate appearances, 183 and 427 since 2023. So he hasn't really hit left-handed pitching well, period, for a while. He's still 4,200, good at baseball and batting cleanup. So I think he's still a solid play, but I'm right around the field on him. I am over the field on Chourio and Hoskins. I like both of those guys here. You have right-handed power upside against Freeland. Since last season for Chourio, 267 plate appearances, only a 151 expected ISO, but does give you stolen base upside as well. Hoskins, 192 expected ISO over that time. So I'm not getting a lot of 5-mans from Milwaukee probably, but I probably do have a decent amount of like 2- and 3-man Chourio, Hoskins, Contreras, something like that. So far this season, obviously it is a park upgrade for Freeland, but so far this season, righties do have a 195 expected ISO against him. 2 more games, which is good because I am extremely tired of talking. Washington taking on the Angels in Los Angeles / Anaheim, whatever you call that. Jose Soriano, $7,400 price tag, 18% ownership. I'm getting to 12%. Jake Irvin on the mound for the Nats. He's not getting any ownership. I don't have him either at 7,500. It is a very good strikeout matchup for Jake Irvin. Unfortunately, he has fallen off the face of the earth as a major league pitcher so far this season. He took these big steps forward last year. Nats fans were getting really excited about him. And then he has completely regressed, at least so far. Stuff plus grade is down 4 points from last year. Strikeout percentage is down 4 points to 16.5%. He's lost 1.7 miles per hour on his fastball. His command's been better. That's the sole metric that he has actually gained in this season. So if you want to go the no ownership $7,500 guy in large field tournaments, you can make yourself feel better about it because the Angels strike out a ton. But beyond that, again, with it just being one of these massive Friday slates, I just am not going that far down the board. Rengifo, Shinwell, Trout, Ward, Adele, Ohapi, Wade, Moore, Newman. That is not a good version of the Angels lineup. So Irvin's projection probably goes up a little bit, but also probably not enough to make him look that good. Soriano is $100 less and projects 2.5 to 3 points higher. I am a little bit lower than the field, but I do think he looks fine here. One interesting thing with Soriano is that we have seen a couple of these like ceiling strikeout games from him recently, which normally I wouldn't really care about, but he actually has really, really nasty stuff. He is generally a really, really good ground ball pitcher that doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. That's who he's been mostly in the major leagues. 21% strikeout percentage last year, 20% so far this year. But then his last three starts, one against the A's, one against the Yankees, one against Houston, 12, 6, and 10 strikeouts, 7 innings, 6 2/3. I don't want to just like say he's this great strikeout pitcher now, but this is somebody that throws like 100 miles an hour. So if he did, he's somebody that like I've always kind of looked at his stuff, and his stuff plus grade this year is much worse than last year, but that could be a change in pitch mix. Not all pitches are necessarily treated equally in the stuff plus metric, but like he's averaging 97.7 miles an hour on his fastball this year. He has excellent command. He's somebody that I've always kind of looked at and been like, if he wants to get strikeouts, he should be able to. I just don't know how much of an emphasis that is for the Angels in general. Jack Kahanowicz should also be able to get at least more strikeouts than he does. The dude is 6'8", throws 98 miles an hour, and cannot strike anybody out. If you say to somebody like that, hey, stop trying to get a ground ball early in every count, instead try and get swings and misses, they should be able to make that adjustment. So I do find it interesting that Soriano has gotten strikeouts suddenly in his last few games. I have 12%, like I said, Fields at 18%. I think he's a good play here against the Nats. They do have like a 4 to 4.5 total. It is a good park for offense. The Nats aren't a horrible offense. They certainly have good hitters in there. But overall, 24th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this year, 14th in WRC+. So again, it's not a cakewalk matchup. But one thing to like about Soriano too is he is, with him being relatively inexpensive, even if you do go back to the 20% strikeout percentage, Jose Soriano, this is one of the best ground ball pitchers in baseball. So even then, there's a pretty good chance that he's just going to get, efficient ground ball outs, give you 6 innings, and you'll still be fine, even if he only strikes out like 4 guys. I did want to try and quickly see if I can immediately see a change in anything that he's done over these last few games. Pitch mix looks pretty much the same at first glance. Throwing his curveball maybe a little bit more, nothing too crazy there. Velo, pretty much the same. Yeah, I don't see anything like really crazy in his stuff from the last couple of games. Doesn't mean he didn't change anything. I can't see a release point or anything like that. But yeah, so I think it's kind of just, it's a good, at worst, it's a good point per dollar play. At best, we're in the beginning stages of Jose Soriano, the strikeout guy. So either way, I think he's a solid play. Not a great matchup, not a good park, but good price tag on him. I'm a little bit below the field, but I think he's just a solid point per dollar play. For the bats here, starting on the Washington side, I'm not getting much of them, even though I am below the field by a little bit on Soriano. It would be an interesting negative correlation spot in this park. But two things here. One, as I've already said many times on this show, just not that interested in the stacking against an 18% owned pitcher just because he's 18% owned on a slate of this size. But also what I was just saying about Soriano, he's such a good ground ball pitcher that even if he's not getting those strikeouts, you're probably just pounding the ball into the ground in a lot of these at-bats. Lefties have a 108 expected ISO against him. Righties have a 125 expected ISO against him. I have 5% Luis Garcia, Josh Bell, 4% James Wood. Like, that's technically over the field, but obviously it's not any sort of huge stand. 3% Brady House, 3% CJ Abrams. So yeah, I have small amounts of the Nats, but nothing too crazy there. On the Angels side, I am getting to them, and probably will get to them a bit more once I have their actual lineup, because while it's not their best lineup, it is a favorable lineup from a value standpoint. Rengifo, was projected to bat probably like 8th. We had Rengifo projected to bat 8th. So he's batting leadoff now at 2,600 against a pitcher in Jake Irvin that has allowed a 294 expected ISO, a 405 expected WOBA, 16% strikeout percentage against left-handed pitching so far this season. That is a big lineup bump for Rengifo. He's very, very cheap. So I expect I'll be getting quite a bit more of him, and that'll help pull up those Angel stacks as well. So far this season, Irvin has allowed 5 stolen bases. He's always graded out as average to above average at preventing steals. But I expect I'll be getting more than the 3% Rengifo I have right now. He was projected for 4% ownership. That'll probably come up as well. I had 14% O'Hoppe, 3,400 catcher with power, 11% Trout. Don't need to really explain that one, but he's only 4,500. Sean Newell, 7% of my lineup, 6% for the field. I had 7% Adele. He's 4% owned, 4% Ward. He's 5% owned. So I think Rengifo probably comes up, and that could even pull a little bit more of the Sean Newell, Ward, Adele guys up too. 3,500 for Adele is a lot of power. 4,300 for Ward is too cheap. Like, I don't know why Taylor Ward has been as inexpensive as he has been all season long. Irvin, while he is while he's terrible against lefties, he's decent against righties. 173 expected ISO to righties, 304 expected WOBA. That is still some power there for guys like Ward, like Trout, like O'Hoppe. So far this season against right-handed pitching, modest 157 expected ISO for Sean Newell, but he is cheap and at the top of the order. 315 expected ISO for Trout, 232 for Ward, 291 for Adele, 218 for O'Hoppe. Rengifo doesn't have power, but again, he's cheap and does have the ability to steal bases, and occasionally he'll hit a home run here or there. So I do like the Angels here. Good value stack, plenty of upside. Most expensive hitter in the lineup is 4,500. I think they're a pretty solid stack here, especially in this park too. Kansas City, a good point per dollar stack, but less likely to get like a home run barrage from the Royals than you are from the Angels. And then finally here, Miami going into Arizona, taking on the Diamondbacks. Yuri Perez pitching for the Marlins. Merrill Kelly going for the D-backs. Kelly getting 12% ownership at 9,600. I'm not really getting there right now. I have 3%. The matchup against the Marlins is solid. The price tag is a little difficult to stomach when you have just relative to the other pitchers on the slate. Not so much that Kelly at 9,600 against the Marlins is bad. More so just that, like, he's more expensive than Sonny Gray. He's more expensive than Dylan Cease. He's way more expensive than Will Warren. He's barely less expensive than Logan Gilbert. He's coming into this game with a 25% strikeout percentage that is up 4 points from last year, so that's good. His command has been better than last year. We're seeing an improved Merrill Kelly this year. So I think he's fine, but I just don't have that much of him right now. On the other hand, I do have 17% Yuri Perez, 3% projected ownership. He has only thrown 11 innings so far this season. His stuff is still graded out well, and this is a spot where we do have a higher projection on him than other places that I've seen. And while I think it's certainly not safe, the Diamondbacks are a good offense. They're also not going to have Corbin Carroll. So they're missing, arguably their best player. They're a little banged up. That weakens the lineup, obviously. There's also no Gabby Moreno. So it's a weaker lineup, but you're getting this really cheap $5,900, $5,800 price tag on Perez, who does have extremely good stuff. He's gone 3, 4, and 4 2/3 innings in his 3 starts this year. He threw 89 pitches in his most recent start, so he's close to fully stretched out. Like, he's young, and I assume they're going to be relatively cautious with him. I don't think he's going to go throw a 110 pitch complete game today or anything, but within reason, he's not really super limited here. And the stuff so far through those first 11 innings has still graded out well. 117.4 stuff plus grade, 98 mile an hour average fastball velocity. That's looked good. And then one thing also that I like to double check when our projections, especially on somebody that doesn't really have a lot of a track record, are higher than consensus, is going to the publicly available projections on Fangraphs. And the bat is on there, and we know that, a large percentage of the field is using the bat projections, and nothing I'm saying here is intended to be a negative towards the bat. I use it for some stuff as well. But a lot of the field is going to use it. And one new projection system on Fangraphs, Oopsie, factors in all the newest, as much as they can, newest pitching metrics, stuff like that. So I like having that as kind of like a neutral new projection system that I know is accounting for up-to-date stuff, and then seeing if it's kind of in line with us, because it's at least easy to defend a higher projection when you look at something like that and it's like, oh, well, they see it the same way we do. And so if you look at Yuri Perez, if you look at his Fangraphs page, I need to pull that back up. I had it up. But if you look at his Fangraphs page, the bat projection for him is strikeout projection is 23.2. Oopsie's at 26.5. That's more in line with what we have. Steamer's at 24.5. Zips is at 25%. So this is a spot where, even though it's not safe, the Diamondbacks are still a tough matchup and all of that. I do feel good about projecting Yuri Perez as a good, like above average strikeout pitcher, even though it's a below average spot and all of that. And then it just goes back to he's $5,800. He is really, really, really cheap. And you're getting that watered down Arizona lineup. Not that it's bad, but it's not as good as it normally is. So I do like the value component for Perez. I think that's another reason why, I'm not necessarily getting quite as much Soriano as the field. I'm not getting to guys like Landon Rupp. I just don't need to when Perez is down here. Drop Rosa said, do you think Yuri Perez's matchup is better than Merrill Kelly's? Absolutely not. The matchup against the Marlins is much better than the matchup against the Diamondbacks, but he's also $4,000 less expensive than Merrill Kelly is. And for context, like, again, just to compare the two, because, that question was asked, and I think it's kind of interesting. Merrill Kelly's 25% strikeout percentage this year is about the same as what most projection systems have Yuri Perez at going forward. So you have similar strikeout stuff between these two guys. Yuri Perez, has much better raw stuff. So yeah, he's just too talented of an arm, I think, to ignore at 3% owned, even call it 5 or 6% owned at $5,800. So again, not a lot of confidence there. There's certainly volatility. The Diamondbacks still have good hitters. He's young, et cetera, but I like the upside he gives you at $5,800. It's not one of these $5,800 plays. It's not like the Kyle Freeland play that I make sometimes where it's like, oh, well, maybe he'll get 12 points and then he'll get a win and I get 16 points at 5K. Yuri Perez, if he's on, can actually go strike out 7-8 guys. Like, he has that kind of stuff. So I do like that as a value play. Moving over to the bats here, had to reload the SaberSim page, so I should have that in a second. It doesn't like to cooperate when I'm streaming for whatever reason. But on the Miami side, offensively against Kelly, wouldn't expect to be getting to much of Miami. I have 7% Agustin Ramirez, 7% Otto Lopez, 7% Jesus Sanchez, 6% Xavier Edwards, 3% Kyle Stowers. So I have some of them the same way I have like some of the Nats, sub 10% to everybody on Miami, but that does still get me over the field on guys that do have power and are cheap. Ramirez has power. Edwards can steal bases. Sanchez has power. Lopez will steal bases. So there is some upside here. Stowers has power. He has come back to earth since his ridiculous start to the year, but nobody here is expensive. I think you can use them as, 2-man, 3-man stacks to save money if you need to. Yeah, not building around them, but they are cheap. They do have some upside. Kelly on the other side. Bilo, whose whip are you referring to? Perez. If it's Perez, he's made 3 starts this year. It doesn't matter. On the Arizona side, I'm not getting to them. The field isn't really getting to them. They're relatively expensive. 6,100 Marte, 5,200 Suarez, 4,900 Naylor. Not a super easy team to stack on a slate where there's a lot of cheap stacks. But again, you can throw them in that bucket with the Cubs and other teams like that, where obviously if you're making Arizona stacks that you like, the ceiling is very high. The problem is just that there's so many good point per dollar stacks. Some of them are probably going to have good games, and it's going to be tough for these more expensive stacks to win, unless some random cheap plays that you're forced onto do really, really well. So to recap, starting at pitcher, my highest owned pitchers, if the slate started an hour and a half ago, were Dylan Cease, Will Warren, Ryan Pepio, Logan Gilbert, and Sonny Gray, followed by Yuri Perez and Jose Soriano. At catcher, you can see the highest projected catchers on the screen. In my lineups, Logan O'Hoppe, it was Hunter Goodman, but not anymore. Salvador Perez, Will Smith, Patrick Bailey, William Contreras. At first base, looking at Luis Arraez, Shohei Ohtani, Rhys Hoskins, Nolan Schanuel, and Matt Olson. At second base, Jonathan India, Brandon Lau, Matt McClain, Cody Clemens, Christian Koss, Xavier Edwards, Tyro Estrada, all tied right around 6%. Second base right now, at least looking like a position where predominantly I'm looking to save money. Of my top 7 owned second baseman, there is one above $4,000, and that's Brandon Lau. At third base, Manny Machado, Rafael Devers, Michael Garcia, Junior Caminero, Brooks Lee are my top 5. Shortstop, Bobby Witt, Xander Bogaerts, Willy Adames, Mookie Betts, Otto Lopez, Carlos Correa, my top 5. Lopez, Correa are tied for 5th. And then in the outfield, Fernando Tatis, Jackson Merrill, Jarren Duran, Jackson Chourio, Mike Trout are my top 5 there. Top 5 overall stacks, San Diego, Kansas City, San Francisco, Angels, and Dodgers. Top 5 five-mans, San Diego, San Francisco, Dodgers, Kansas City, and Minnesota. Home run pick, going to not take one of the super easy ones. I'm going to go with, I thought there was somebody that I liked during the show, but I'm forgetting who it was. I'll go Devers. I don't think that's cheating when you have, Judge, Ohtani, etc. So Devers, highest home run projection on the slate. I like that. I think Devers looks good. Take him for the home run pick. Thanks for checking out the show. Good luck on your lineups tonight. Have a good weekend. See you back here next week.